You think that indie films are going to be a mess and studio films are going to be precise, and it's the opposite. On Mission Impossible, it's like, oh, we didn't make the day. Oh, have another day. And this is the part that nobody will do because you think I can't write to this Oscar-winning editor. They're my heroes. Actually, you can. Making it a little personal is quite important because what's at stake, which is the whole rest of your career. If you just go and shadow the editor and you ignore the team, you're ignoring the people who are going to be doing the hiring when the time comes. I brought some like croissants and some all this stuff to the cutting room because all throughout the day people will be coming in, oh, where did these come from?
By the way, the reason why this is hilarious and timely is because we're launching a new course on how young editors can get jobs. I don't think we should say anything more.
That's the one word syllabus.
Hey everyone, I'm Rafi Salem back with another edition of Manhattan Edit Workshop's Talking MEWShop. And today, as always, we have Josh Apter and Jason Denke, and we are very, very excited to welcome Christopher Frith. I spelled it correctly, I pronounced it correctly, so I'm feeling good. Josh, take it away.
I won't even try to pronounce your name, Christopher. I'm just gonna left it to Rafi. But sure, I'm Josh. I founded Manhattan Edit Workshop over 20 years ago. Jason's been here over half that time. We run all kinds of workshops, the core one being a 6-week art of editing intensive. And teaches you a lot of the why of editing, not just the how, not just the technical. It's really a lot of theory in the class. And part of that is bringing artists in residence in who are industry professionals, much like yourself, Christopher, to talk about their, or how they got started, and they look at the students' work, and it's really kind of a great place to get your sort of your experience going and your community going, and so it's a real great experience. There's one that just started 2 days ago out there next door. So hopefully you don't hear any screaming of like, I don't understand Premiere. What's this supposed to do? Which is why we do Premiere first, not Avid first. I don't know what's on there behind you, Christopher.
Avid.
Look, it's Avid. Yeah. So we used to do Avid first. And I remember there were these, like on Wednesday of the week one, I'd get these couples, like it'd be one student in almost every class would come in glassy eyed, like, I don't know if I can do this. And they're just like petrified of all the rigid technology around learning Avid. And I said, look, this is as hard as it's ever going to get. It's like the first time once you repeat these concepts, it's just going to get easier and easier. But it's a lot of information. Just trust the process. And, invariably people would calm down and lather, rinse, repeat, and just, these things would just sort of settle into their muscle memory. And now we do Premiere first, which I think is a much easier intro into the whole, the more tech side of it. But yeah, it's tough. We'll talk about your being on Avid during the show, but I wanted to throw it to Jason because you went through the process. You were never afraid.
Yeah, and I think most of those people you're talking about ended up like they became avid users. Like I feel like they were like fearing it at first, and then they liked the way it was presented. We could talk about that, but I'll, Christopher, just we usually kind of get people's like background and stuff like that. And I was doing a little bit of research on you, and we came across you because of the editor that you've worked with a lot, Eddie Hamilton, and you've done a lot of work with him. But it, based on what I looked up, it sounds like you started like doing stuff in Bermuda. Is that correct? Is that where you were like raised and started doing like getting into this like film industry type stuff and the interest for that? Can you tell us a little bit how you got your start?
Yeah, exactly. I was born in Bermuda and I lived there until I went to university when I was like 17. So there's not a whole lot of filmmaking going on there, but they do have quite a well-renowned festival, which is a qualifying festival for the Academy Awards. So you do get some really good films and some really good artists and filmmakers come there. So I was sort of aware of that, and I would try and go to some screenings there as much as I could. But really, it was just to sort of pick up the camera and just film something. And oh, I enjoyed that. That was fun. I preferred doing this than my homework. And then I would sort of, as I kind of got a bit older, I was like, okay, I need to stop filming random things and start making a story. So then I would just do that, write a short script and go out with my friends and make a little short film, and I did a few of those. And then one of them I kind of properly threw myself into and scheduled it and shot it over 7 days. And I mean, had kind of storyboarded everything, scheduled it all, and went and filmed it. And that's kind of when I realized at the end of every day, my favorite part was getting back home, and it was mini DV tape at the time, and it was just going through the tape and capturing that into Final Cut Pro 5, I think it was at the time. And the internet wasn't what it was even now, so I'd never seen a professional timeline, which are so accessible these days, and kind of like what you're doing now. None of that was really available, but I had managed to read some small blogs about indie filmmaking, and one of them had said the thing that's really obvious that your film is micro budget is the sound because you just use the on-camera mic and get really bad sound, which is exactly what I'd done. So I decided then to ADR everything. And that threw me down the process of re-recording all the dialogue and get everybody in the cutting room and record it all, and then putting in all the footsteps and all the Foley and all the backgrounds and just learning about all of that, and then and getting really nerdy about like how can I make my 480p mini DV look more like film. And it was like, well, if I deinterlace the odd fields on V1 and then duplicate it and deinterlace the even fields on V2 and offset it by a frame and put the opacity at 50%, then it looks like motion blur, and I'd get to deinterlace it
Oh
and I
my
have plus
God.
half the horizontal resolution. And then I was like, I think like editing is probably where I should start moving towards. And then as I got even older and even more mature, I
Wait, can we
realized
geek out on that for a second though? That was like the greatest, like, because I know exactly what you did. It's like poor man's film look. You put a 50% opacity layer above the video layer and you do a deinterlace trick. And so were you shooting on, I don't like, I mean,
like a
this is gonna
single.
be for a very, this is like a, what was the DV camera? It's like 03, 04?
This would have been, yeah, this would have been maybe even earlier. Yeah, the main film that I ADR'd everything was 2007.
Okay.
Uh, so I would have been about 15. But yeah, that's exactly it. It's a single CCD mini DV camera, and it's just
Mhm.
anything you can do to. I was careful not to handhold it because I'd read about that, and I sort of made a little. You're bringing back all these memories that I haven't thought about for a long time. Where I
I got
made
the V. I have a VX1000 out there in the gallery. I'll bring it out. I swear. Don't tempt me.
I made this
Um,
like steady cam with a T junction and a pole here and a pole here and another pole here with a barbell weight down the bottom, and that was like the steady cam that you could sort of, and then you could have it upside down and get really cool tracking shots low to the ground as
sure.
well. But no, what I was saying was, then after that was when I started to appreciate that there's a huge story component to it, and obviously I have a sort of I was really interested in the tech at the time, but then as I got even older, I started to realize this sort of emotional impact that you could make with editing and the storytelling possibilities. Um, and I think because at that when I was doing those films in Bermuda, I was doing everything and directing it and lighting it and all of it. Um, and then you go to film school, which is what I did, and it's kind of, oh, you want to be a director because everybody wants to be a director. And it was kind of, I'd already had that experience where I was like, actually, I kind of like having, because the editor has a huge amount of creative input, as you know, but it's kind of nice not to be the face of it and not to be, I much prefer being sort of on my own and working very closely with the director, but not being on set with lots of people. It's just a thing that kind of suits me more, I think. And then so that was in Bermuda, and then I went to a university in the States called North Carolina School of the Arts, which is actually a pretty good film school. Although I will say, I think the biggest takeaway from film school for me, we made lots of student films and they were really high quality, and I, you know, was learned Avid there and Pro Tools and did all these things. But the best thing, like a decade later, that I take away from that is, well, I had this world cinema class where it was a 4 hour class, and you would spend the first hour talking about the social and political climate of a given country. Then you'd spend the next 2 hours of the class watching a film that was made at that
Uh,
time, and then you would have the last hour deconstructing it. And so I've seen some really strange and unique movies that I don't even know if I could get now if it wasn't for that. But certainly to watch them and then dissect both the film as a work of art, but also with an understanding of the context in which it was made, I think was really quite a formative thing, sort of in my sort of taste, I guess you could say.
are there any
I
films that you remember from that class? Or I don't want to put you on the spot, but
No, I do. I mean, there's all the ones you'd expect, the 400 Blows, the Bicycle Thief, the Cabin of Dr. Caligari, but I really discovered Ernst Lubitsch through that class, and there was a film he made called Trouble in Paradise. And from the first frame, they set the tone as a comedy from the first frame. It's like there's a shot of a bedroom, and it's trouble in, and then the bed, and then the word paradise fades in, you know. So so they told a visual joke on the first shot of the first of that film. What else?
I was very curious. Usually we start off with this intro with, well, I was a kid in high school and I had a camera and everything. But this is like the first time someone told us about a class that really impacted them, and that's a very cool way that you got into this.
I mean, it's great going to, when you're in your first couple of years of film school, you have to work in like below the line positions for the upperclassmen movies. So that's really good. I mean, it's great that I have been a sound recordist on a film set on a short film, and I've used a 744 field recorder, and I understand that. I think having that knowledge in the back of my mind helps a little bit, because so much of what we do, when you sort of are working professionally as a first assistant editor, and someone asks for something, it's like, well, how should I do it? People are never really clear most of the time. It's like, can I get this? And they don't say I would. These are my delivery specs. Can you send me this? It's like, well, how would they want it? What's going to be most helpful for them? Um, and I think knowing what other people are, how they do what they do helps a little bit in terms of your interaction with them from the cutting room. Um, but yeah, that World Cinema class I think was pretty formative.
So Josh, I'm very curious, in terms of the timeline. I don't want to repeat it because it's kind of funny. You were saying in 2007 you were 15. Did I get that completely wrong, Christopher?
That's about right.
So,
Yeah.
so we had on a couple of months ago Paul Hirsch, who is
All that.
decades old, and to see people's careers take off the way that you have. I mean, I'd love to get into, unless we want to talk more about your history, I'd love to hear about some of the stuff that you're working on now.
Yeah, sure. No, the only other thing I would say about history, which is for like younger viewers who want to get into the industry, is I come from a tiny little island with no family in the industry, and now I'm here having worked on some huge things. So I would just highlight that if this is kind of something you want to go into, don't let anybody discourage you because it is possible if you want to do it. Someone has to do it.
I mean, I don't want to go. I know this isn't what you're doing now, but like, okay, so you got from this little island to Mission Impossible, and early on, right in the mid-franchise, I guess. But like, how did that happen? I'm not saying like I'm surprised, but like, where were you? How did you get to from I guess at North Carolina
Yeah.
to an interest in post and editing to the beginnings of this career to like this incredible like this is a coveted spot you have in the film industry. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's surprisingly simple and almost nobody will do it, but it's just the whole industry runs on word of mouth. And so when I was in university, I met this editor called Laurie Coleman who wrote a book called Make the Cut, which is an outstanding book for assistant editors. I really recommend it. And it covers what's great about that book in particular over other books is it's not just about the technical running of the cutting room, but it's also about the unwritten rules of the cutting room. I think there's a chapter called Unspoken Etiquette of the cutting room, and it's about just how to behave, which sounds really dumb, and a lot of people that comes naturally, but I think it is really good to have it sort of spelled out. So anyway, meeting her and sort of her whole ethos was don't take up more space than you need to, but if you also do need to sort of put yourself out there. So I would start writing early on. I found an ACE member roster and I started writing to all my favorite editors. And this is the part that nobody will do because you think I can't write to this Oscar-winning editor. They're my heroes. Actually, you can. Um, Especially now when there's all the strikes and all the work is dried up. They're probably quite available. Um, so I just started writing to people, but it was a short, like 150 word thank you message, basically. It was a thank you for what you've done and contribute to the industry. Because the worst thing is, here's my CV. Yeah, I'd love, it's not the worst thing, but you get varying degrees of here's 800 words about me and why you should hire me, and here's my CV in your face. And I was like really careful to do 100 words just to thank you for what you do. And then sometimes you'd never hear back. And sometimes you'd get a one word, one sentence back. But sometimes someone would write even 5 sentences. And if they did that, then I would try and just push it. But actually, I was doing this when I was still in university. So I was in North Carolina and I was doing this. So I would write to these editors once every 6 months for like the last couple of years I was in university. So I wasn't bothering them. And also I made sure to do it in a way that it was about them, not about me. So whenever they had a film come out, I'd write to them. Whenever it was like July 4th or Thanksgiving or something that you can just say happy this or happy that, where it's not just about me. It's like, I hope you were enjoying the, happy Thanksgiving or something, something
So
like
you would wish Bruce Willis a happy Merry Christmas? every Christmas?
No, but
Just
Thelma
kidding.
Schoonmaker was getting Christmas cards from you.
Well, Thelma
Um,
was one of the people that I wrote to, and she did write back, and it was really lovely. And
mhm,
I had a little exchange with her.
That's
And
very cool.
Lee Smith was another one who I loved his work, and I'd written to him, again, it was like 4 emails over 2 years. It was nothing. But then when I graduated, I got to say I've graduated and I'm coming to LA. And so
mhm.
a couple days after I graduated, I was sat with him and John Lee in his cutting room on Ender's Game.
Wow.
That's great.
It's really small, just reaching out to people in a non-annoying way. And it's never annoying. It's always nice when people write to you, but sometimes I get messages that are 1,000 words. And the problem with that is, if you've taken the time to write all that to me, I want to give you a proper response myself. But I can't just do that really quickly on the train home. I have to sit down
Mhm,
and do that. So I'll do it at lunch, and then lunch comes in. You don't want to look at a computer, so I'll do it at the end of the day, and then the end of the day, and before you know it, 2 weeks can go by, and then it's kind of embarrassing even. So
mhm.
you want it to be something where it's like, oh, that's nice. I'll quickly just reply to that now while I'm walking back. That's really the trick, is to keep it really short and sweet.
Have you ever told someone who's written you 1,000 word letter, just out of interest and, that you might want to reconsider your strategy? Like, loved your letter, but what I have found more successful is writing something that can be responded to on a train ride.
Closest thing I've done to that is when I got one that said they liked my work on Jurassic World, which I didn't work on. Um, And what happened there is, because it's a really small, I mean, in terms of like how many movies are like $150 million movies a year, and then how many of those are in London? I mean, there's like 10 of us, six, maybe less, that do this job, and we all know each other, and so it's happened probably more than 5 or 6 times. You'll hear ding 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 around the cutting room, and it's like you'll walk into someone's, did you just get this email from so and so? Yeah, did you? Yeah, did you? And normally that's no problem, but if it's the exact same email. I mean, I can recall vividly, like standing in the doorway of another assistant editor's cutting room, and like we were just finishing each other's sentences, reading the identical email to each other, and it's just kind of like, I get it, you're trying to mass email, but I think making it a little personal is quite important, because what's at stake, which is the whole rest of your career. So and then even when I'm not working with people, we'll screenshot, because we're kind of petty, to be honest. So we'll just screenshot. Did you get this? Oh yeah, it's this guy again. Yeah, yeah. So I might have, I probably have said, make it more personal. And the other thing I do is I critique CVs a lot, or resumes. Whenever I get resumes from people who are just starting out and they're 2 or 3 pages, I tend to try and persuade them to get it down to 1 page.
Well, and I think, look, it's not, I don't know what it is. We've talked to a lot of editors, and generally speaking, they are open, accessible, and really want to give back.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that that's unique to editors, but it seems really common amongst them that they give of their time, they encourage people. They just feel like I had a mentor. That
yeah,
experience maybe doesn't exist the same way today, but I want to provide something to that next generation of professionals. And it's great. And that's why I think you got the response you did. It's and why you do it now.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you're very right.
Well, now we can find out how you got yourself mixed up in that whole Mission Impossible business.
So I went to university in the States, and that gave me a year after I graduated. I could stay on a student visa. So I spent that time in LA, and I was working a night shift for a reality TV show, so that during the daytime I could go and meet all these editors. Um, I try and, go for coffee for an editor during their lunch break, and then go to work in the evening, and that kind of worked well. But I couldn't stay. My visa was running out, and I kind of looked at all the options, but there was no option that wouldn't limit me. The only way you can really stay and work freelance and creatively is like with an O1 or an O2 visa, which is someone's fresh out of film school. I didn't stand a chance of getting. So begrudgingly, I kind of turned my sights to London, which was kind of the other big city where I can live without a visa, because Bermuda's a British
A
territory, even though I don't sound that British. Um,
little bit.
so yeah, I just sound Canadian because I've been between the US and the UK, but I'm not Canadian at all. But so I sort of, when I realized I'm going to have to leave, and London's where I'm going to go, which just worked out, in hindsight, it couldn't have been better. But at the time, all through film, like since I was 15, I wanted to live in LA. And so it was kind of a really shattering moment to accept that I was going to have to leave. But I did leave, and when I knew I was going to be leaving, I started looking at who was over here, and Eddie Hamilton had this great website. He still has this great website with a huge advice page. And he just seemed, and at the time, this was he was just finishing the first Kingsman at this time, so he had done like I mean he's done loads of films, but the main ones he had done was X-Men First Class with Lee Smith, and the Kick-Ass movies and Resident Evil and those kinds of things. But I don't think he was as renowned as he is now. But anyway, he had his email on his website, so I just wrote to him, and he wrote back and he said, "Let me know when you're here and we'll meet up." So I did that and I met up, and then I brought some like croissants and some all this stuff to the cutting room, because what I learned from Laurie Coleman is if someone invites you to the cutting room, that's the best case scenario because you can meet the whole team. And what I
Mhm.
learned is if you just go and shadow the editor and you ignore the team, one, you're ignoring the people who are going to be doing the hiring when the time comes, and two, they'd love to be shadowing the editor if they had time, but they don't. So you're kind of undercutting them in a way. So I thought if I take all this croissants and fruit bowl or whatever else, donuts or something, to the cutting room and then leave them there, and then all throughout the day people will be coming in, oh, where did these come from? And then by the end of the day, everyone's going to know that someone was there. But it's just a way of showing
By the way,
appreciation.
the reason why this is hilarious and timely is because we're launching a new course on how young editors can get jobs. I don't think we should say anything more.
Pastries. That's the one word syllabus.
Pastries?
Pastries. But that's I mean, honestly, what a great idea
It's
because you're
showing appreciation.
associated
It's
with
just
like, yeah, they're like you make them happy, right? Like it's like it's a thoughtful gesture, but not overdoing it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and if you can, if there's time, it depends on the day. But if there's time, it's great to poke your head in and spend a few minutes with each of them. Yeah, I mean, there have been times where, because Eddie's really generous with his time, and I've seen people come in and go, but they don't. If they don't take the time to talk to her, we don't know them. And then Eddie can say, "I met this person this morning." Well, I didn't. Um, so I think appreciating the assistants and not undercutting them, and just yeah, just anyway. So I did that when he was finishing Kingsman. And it was funny actually, because by this point I had met a lot of my editing heroes, and I always had a notebook, and I always had questions I would ask them that weren't the obvious questions either. And they weren't questions that I could just Google online. It was like questions that I couldn't find the answer to, that which was easier then because all these kind of things, this is still 10 years ago. I mean, 12 years ago. So it still wasn't, the knowledge wasn't that accessible as it is now. But I would have all these questions that I'd ask all my favorite, sitting with Chris Rouse or Lee Smith and people like that. And I do the same thing for Eddie, but then and also usually you go and you meet them for 10 minutes and then you're done. And with Eddie, I remember it was 45 minutes, and I left and I was like, oh, I didn't get to ask him any of my questions. He just asked me the whole time, and I didn't realize, but he basically he was just doing his deal for Rogue Nation, and he was going to need a trainee for that. And so I guess I got incredibly lucky and met him at just the right time. So then he did get the job on Rogue Nation, and then he put me forward to the assistant editors on that team. So then I went and interviewed with them,
All
and
right,
got that.
wait a second. You made your own luck. You didn't get really lucky.
The
You
timing
made
was
your
very
own luck.
unfortunate.
Right. The timing, it's like persistence, politeness, luck, pastries. Like there's a certain sort of, and I'm
And
not
at
saying
the
there's
same
a
time, I was ready to. I mean, I really thought I'd be sweeping the floors in the post house for a lot longer. I mean, I was ready to do that, and I was like going to McDonald's and using the free Wi-Fi to send out all these CVs, and even now people say, I say write to post houses and such, because there's not that is another good way of doing it, is get a running job in a post house, and you'll still meet all of their clients in a way, and maybe you can, shadow someone at some point. And then people will say, well, which ones? And I'm like, all of them. What do you mean all of them? All of them. I mean, how many are there in Soho? Maybe there's 50 or 60. That's what, 10 emails a day. So, I mean, until you have the job you want, unless you're doing another job, but if you're straight out of university and you don't have a job, then finding a job is your full-time job. 10 emails a day. I mean, we're not, you could go round to them anyway. I think that's what Eddie said he did. I think he has a story about putting a four-finger Kit Kat bar in an envelope and delivering them around post houses in Soho. Which I don't know how that would go over today, but it's just little gestures. But yeah, basically it's like I was contacting everybody, and then this thing with Eddie worked out. But if it hadn't, I would have found a job at Company 3 or some other post house, and then I would have been like try doing the best you can at the job you have, and then trying to soak in everything else. That's what I tell trainees as well. It's like, can I admit that I want to edit even though I'm a trainee? you can, as long as you're really good at what you're paid to do now. If you're good at the job you have, then it's okay to discuss the job you want. If you're just crap at doing what you're supposed to be doing and all you talk about is how great you are on the Avid whilst you've made a cold cup of tea, well, then I can't trust you to do a good job at anything else. It's
Mhm.
you have to kind of earn it in a way. And it's not a I had to do it, so you have to do it. It's not like that. It's just if I say all these things on the grocery list for the week and then the cutting room stock isn't what's I've asked for, then how do I know that when I do get you doing
Mhm.
dailies or doing a turnover, how do I know that that's going to be any better?
Yeah,
So I
we've
think
had some students that went to a post house. This is years ago, but like, and I remember the gentleman who owned it said, "Look, this person's they're here as an entry level person. I know they want to be an editor, but they seem to not be able to wait. They have no patience for like this happens in its own time." And I think they asked, like, "Do you know when I'll be editing?" Like in the first week of being there to like be a PA, and they said,
yeah,
"When we tell
yeah,
you, and
ambition
don't
and
ask again." It's just
yeah,
like you have to
And where are our
understand.
pastries?
yeah. Yeah, no, it's you definitely want to stay motivated and ambitious for sure. But yes, you do have to kind of measure it. And I'm trying to, it was, I think it was Laurie Coleman again who said this thing, which is the whole attitude that it sounds really, I'll tell you what she said, and it sounds really harsh, but it's actually not. She's the most wonderful, warm person. But it's this attitude of just being really, really on it, where she said to me once, there's no such thing as a stupid question, except for a question asked twice. And what she meant was if you're going to interrupt, if I'm working on a scene and my head's in the dailies and I'm getting emotional about this character and you interrupt me to ask me a question, that's okay. But you better remember the answer. And for some people, they've got a memory that can do that. For some people, they have to write it down. People carry their phones with them. But anyway, I would never go into the editor's room without a notebook or my phone or something to write down,
Mhm.
ever. Even if you're going in for something dumb, like, do you want a cup of tea? Always just have it with you because you'll go, the number of times I've gone in to say, can I make you a cup of tea? And it's like, oh, by the way, have a look at this on this take at this frame on it. And it's like,
Um,
what I can't remember what, and then it's so embarrassing to go back and say, sorry, what was that? What was the take that you need? So embarrassing to do
and
that.
it's avoidable. That's the thing. Like you
Yeah.
can. Now, weird thing is, like I've seen people taking notes on phones, and it looks like they're texting or being distracted. Now, look, if someone's talking to you and you're clearly taking notes
Yeah,
on what
no,
they're
I get
saying,
it. Yeah.
but it's a weird thing. Like I guess now, I mean, this
I
was
think it's
like,
a sign of the times.
yeah, it's just like
I
I
know you,
remember.
I completely get it.
Yeah, I taught a class at NYU on like digital filmmaking, mobile filmmaking or something like that. I did a guest lecture, and everyone's on their devices. I'm like, can we just close our shit and talk? And they're
Yeah.
like, well, but we're taking notes. And I'm like, oh, I didn't get like
Yeah.
on iPads, on iPhones, on laptops. It's just like
Yeah.
it's all changed. I'm too old. I don't get it. I need a 3-ring binder.
You weren't
But that
15
extends
in
to everything.
2007, Josh?
No.
It extends to everything, though. Don't chew gum when someone's talking to you. Don't eat a noisy packet of. I mean, they sound really. It sounds really uptight when I say it all like this, but I think this is the kind of attitude that has worked very well for me, and that um I think if you want to work on these kinds of things as well, I think I believe that the quality control threshold and like the standard of your work should be really world class. If you're working on these things, I mean, if you're working on something really tiny and you're learning the ropes, I get it. But when you are working on something like Mission Impossible, these are the best. It's one of the biggest films ever. You're working with some of the best people in the world, and you really want to bring your A game. And I think that does extend down to little behavioral things sometimes. And these are all just things to aspire to. I mean, everybody has days where they're not perfect. And I'm not saying every day is perfect. I mean, it becomes such an intense, pressured environment that, of course, there are days where it's just really difficult to maintain that level of optimism and I mean, it's cutting rooms a casual environment. We've all heard screaming and shouting and swearing and all these kinds, but it's something that you aspire to.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career. Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
So when you got in there and you got the trainee position, like what, without getting too technical, like what were you doing? Like what were they? Because you obviously went for a long way beyond that with all these other huge films. So with Eddie, so like, what were you doing to like kind of start out as like a trainee?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, Eddie's very technical himself, and I was quite fortunate that I had an Avid on that film, one of Eddie's own. Like it was just a laptop in the corner, but it was on the Nexus. Was it a Nexus? It might have even been an ISIS then. Anyway, I was on, and I could still do. So at first, it was just the teas, the coffees, the paperwork every morning. We don't do printing anymore, but back then it was printing out whatever the continuity and the facing pages and line script and all that, and the editor would have a copy and the assistants would have a copy, and the camera sheets would be organized in camera roll order, but also by date order. So we had two copies of the camera sheet. So it was like these 9 binders that I'd be updating every morning. That was shot on film as well. So it was like going through the sound and marking up where you could hear the clap. Um, and so it was I feel it's a bit different in the UK because it's all non-union, so we're not barred from using an Avid as a trainee. So I sort of look at it like a trainee is part assistant and part PA, and the balance between the parts depends on the needs and how good you are. So I was making tea all the time. I was making going around every hour and making tea and then washing up after lunch and or going and getting lunches and all those kinds of things. But eventually I would get involved with the dailies. And then what happened on that film was it was meant to shoot from August 14 until December 14 and then come out December 15. And what happened is it shot from August 14 until April 15 and then it came out July 15. So we had 6 months taken off the schedule and 4 months added to the shoot. So we just needed more help in editorial. And then what ended up happening was they hired another person to be a PA and just get me on the Avid full time, basically. So I kind of became an assistant editor throughout the process by doing little things. Um, Either that nobody else wanted to do. I mean, it was like, I need to do this really tricky split screen. Can you just roto around this and animate it? It's like, yeah, sure, I can do that. It will take ages and I can just sit there and get it done. Um, so I think it was just being accurate in everything, like whatever I was asked to do on Avid and then whatever I was asked to do otherwise. I mean, if it's Earl Grey with a bit of milk and one sugar, it's like that's as important at that stage as H.264, 6000 Mbps, 1080p, stereo sound, ACC, 320K. You know what I mean? It's like all of that, those details doesn't matter at that stage. Everything was really important. Um, and it was running at that time we were still running drives to set and stuff. Nowadays we do very little of that. So I kind of just through the schedule compression on that film, I ended up kind of just I was just basically just an assistant editor at the end of that. And what's interesting about that as well is even though I felt like I was really competent on Avid beforehand and all of that, there's so much that you learn on the job. I mean, I learned more in the first few weeks of that job than, in a long time at film school, for example, in Avid classes and what we do. And also film schools just teach you about editing and being an editor, and they don't actually teach you about, sometimes they do. I mean, I had a little bit talking about change lists and EDLs and things, but a lot of that stuff you don't really encounter until you're like a proper assistant. Um, so yeah, and I also realized that I thought a film like that was going to be like a well-oiled machine. And the opposite is true. I've learned is also with indie films, you think that indie films are going to be a mess and studio films are going to be precise, and it's the opposite because studio films can afford to experiment in a way that indie films, on Mission Impossible, it's like, oh, we didn't make the day. Oh, have another day. On an indie film, it's like we have 22 days. We didn't make the day. What are we going to cut?
When you go into an environment like that, they have a way that they like to do things that you have to learn. And that's a very valuable part of the education, is not just understanding how someone wants their tea and understanding the depth of codecs and things, but like how the place where you're working runs their house. Like they have their own recipe,
Yeah.
and wrapping your head around that is as valuable as you can't come in and apply your own, well, I do it this way. They're like, well, great, said no one. Like this is how we need it done.
Yeah.
And so being able to adapt to sort of like the the idiosyncrasies or specific needs of a facility and an editor and a team is really crucial.
And what's good with Eddie is he's always open-minded though. It's like this is how it's done. But if you have a better way, not when you're a trainee maybe, but for when we hire a new assistant or something, if you see something that we're doing, then you think you have a better way, tell us and we'll see and we'll evaluate it and we'll say, oh, it's not better because it doesn't do this, or oh, that is better. Let's adopt it. And so we do change what we do. as we go. We didn't do our turnovers the same way on Dead Reckoning as we did on Rogue Nation. We do learn and adapt and I mean that's the other thing. There's always a new camera. There's always a new. It's never like this is just the only way. There's like the camera we filmed on for Top Gun didn't exist when we were doing Fallout. That kind of thing.
That's very interesting. So are you
So
cutting scenes on some of these? Like so just describe your current job on on the last and final, I can't hardly believe it, Mission Impossible movie. Like, how has your work evolved and what you're expected to do?
Yeah, it's interesting. That one was really quite unusual because I was on location for a lot of it. I was in South Africa for 5.5 months.
Wow.
And I remember when I went out there, I kind of was like, I don't know what my job even is going to be out here. It's like I'm coming out here with Eddie, and I know what Eddie's going to do, but I don't really know what I'm going to do. I mean, am I going to just be the interface between the lab and Eddie or what? And it ended up just evolving in that, these planes would land and then I'd get the card straight off the DIT and I'd be making my own proxies before it even went to the lab so that they could review. As soon as the planes landed, they would all come into this briefing room and watch what they just shot, all grouped together and synced up. And so I was like using Resolve and doing stuff that I had never really had to do in a professional environment before. The way it's evolved really is just from going up to basically it's my team now. So I like have second assistants and a trainee, and it's kind of with that. I think when you're a second assistant, you can put your headphones on and block everything out and just focus on the Avid and just do the work basically. And I feel like as a first assistant, it's sort of you get on the Avid when you can, but you're also on emails and just coordinating and managing and that kind of thing. So it's like I'm keeping track of people's hours and I'm making sure the best thing is anticipating. That's the best thing you can do as a first assistant is anticipate what your editor's going to need, what the director's going to need, what the crew are going to need, whether they're going to want reference on set. And then figure out when's the work backwards. Like we're doing a preview here, so they want a temp mix here, so they need our turnovers by that, that kind of thing. I think it's just having a more global picture. As a second assistant, you can be less aware of what's going on. You just have to like, I'm going to do my turnover. Whereas as a first assistant, I think it's kind of they're scoring at this date and they're going to use this version of that. So I need to get it to the music, that you sort of just are more aware of what's happening in all the other departments. But for me, it's yeah, I was like doing these transcodes for Eddie in Africa, and then we cut as much as I cut as much as I can, but it is really difficult to find the time. It's almost always in your own time. But I did do a decent amount on this, especially assembly stuff because the end of Dead Reckoning and the beginning of Final Reckoning kind of overlapped. So I was able to do some assembling on that whilst Dead Reckoning was being fine cut. Also, we make these. We don't send dailies to the studio. This is the only film I've ever done it on. We just don't show Paramount anything. So we don't send them dailies. So we just make these sizzle reels every 6 months. We'll make like a 4-minute reel of what we've been up to, which we can show the studio and show the crew. And those always take on a bit of a life of their own because you'll edit a little reel but then the director needs to approve it and then Tom needs to approve it and then it becomes a whole thing that takes a while. But in the case of Final Reckoning, I did one of those and that's what became the first trailer.
Oh,
The,
wow.
the very first thing. It was basically I mean, it wasn't like exactly my thing, but I basically put it together and all those, that it has all those shots and then it fades to black and there's a shot and it fades to black. So that piece of music was written first, and then I just cut this like crew sizzle thing to that, and then most of the shots that I'd chosen kind of stayed, and then it was handed off to some trailer editors, and I think marketing had to add some extra lines and that kind of thing in it. But sort of the overall structure and the shot selection
Mhm.
was something that I'd put together as a crew sizzle that then became the trailer. And then what I'm doing is on top of so it is all when you're thick in post it is basically a lot of turnovers and communication with other departments, but I'm always watching and I'm always Eddie's a really great collaborator and I can always make suggestions to him, and he's actually really great because he'll just say try it and show me, he's never on Fallout. I remember very clearly sending him a really long email. I'd just done a QC of everything. I'd like watched the whole thing back to that they were going to preview. And while I was doing that, he was flying to the States for this preview. So I did write him a really long email and I went through every reel of my thoughts. And he came back and he responded to everything that I'd said. And it was either I agree with it, let's try it, or I don't agree with it, here's why, or we can't do it and here's why. But then he ended his message with feel free to try and implement any of these ideas and we'll take a look when I'm back. And so now I kind of just do that. in general, I'll always just sub out a scene in a separate sequence and just say, hey, Eddie, I've done an alternate of this. I've done a, you know, the biplane scene, for example. It's like, here's your 15-minute assembly. Here's your 7-minute assembly, and here's a 4-minute assembly
Hmm.
if you want, you know, because if you're an assistant who wants to edit, then you need to have the same kind of opinions as your editor and align yourself with your editor. So when I'm watching dailies and just preparing the footage for Eddie, if I see something I really like, I'll put a green marker on it. You know, it's not just like here's your generic, all the footage is prepared for you. Sometimes it's like I've seen some bits also because on any given day there could be 4 to 10 hours of footage sometimes.
Wow.
For there's this big dialogue scene in the new one that Ethan has with the president. And we do these line strings for Eddie, which is not all the dailies. It's just every line of every speaking. And that sequence was 14 hours for that
Oh.
scene. So it would be so easy. I mean, Eddie's incredibly thorough, but it probably really does help him, I think, to just say, "Oh, there's a really good look here that I saw in the middle, in between, you know, while they're resetting even. But I put a green marker on it. So I sort of always have these little ways of trying to creatively contribute from preparing the dailies to, it's really hard to find time to assemble from scratch, but I spend more time taking what he's done and then reworking it or restructuring stuff. I mean, on Dead Reckoning, it was the first act was really difficult to get a handle on, and I had done this edit which stayed, which was there's that big dialogue scene with Carrie Elwes in the beginning of the film, and sort of it goes from the desert into that scene, and then back to the desert, and then back to that scene, and then into the main titles, and that was kind of something that I'd figured out. So stuff like that, but it's always on top of, and again, like what we said about being a trainee even now, it's always on top of my responsibilities. It's never like, oh, I
It's
didn't get that
amazing.
turnover out the door, but I have managed to do
Mhm.
an edit of that. Like that wouldn't work.
Well, to have the mental energy and, you know, to be able to compartmentalize the creative work with the logistical work, it's kind of amazing. And it seems like you have gotten to a point now where you and Eddie are like, you know, you're almost like have a mind meld, a little bit of, you know, like you're not, I'm saying share a brain, but like he'll trust you if you say, look, I marked this look. This is something to see because he may
You get
not
to know
see
what
it
you're looking
twice.
for.
Like, you know what I mean? Like he has to know he can trust your instincts as his own to some degree.
Yeah, and it's good for us. I mean, sometimes he will say, we'd have bits like, you know, I'm trying to manufacture a moment where Gabriel comes at Ethan and from the right-hand side in the plane. Is there any shot we can use that will do that? And someone will remember. I mean, it's crazy things like all these. Have you seen the film? There's all these like missiles flying through the air at the end, and it's like, can you go through all the South Africa footage and find good pieces of well-lit, beautiful clouds that we can pump missiles into for a moment that we're going to create now that it wasn't filmed for that? And it's interesting because I started doing this on Kingsman 2. There's a scene in Kingsman 2 that I don't think he changed. It's still in there, which was when it's like when Michael Gambon is I think it's the only scene he's in near the beginning of the film. But I learned I would put a scene together for Eddie, and I'd get lots of notes, and then as I went over the course of a film, I'd be able to put scenes together and get fewer and fewer notes. And then after that, I went on another film and I worked with an editor called Col Gowdy, and I got to assemble the scene, and I assembled it. I handed it over, and I said, "That's fantastic. They'll love that." And then it came back with loads of notes, and I was like, "Oh, hang on, this is." But Eddie would have loved that. And over the course of that film, I could start doing assemblies and get fewer and fewer notes. And by the end of that, I think if you gave me the same set of rushes and said, do one version like Eddie and one version like Cole, I think I could sort of give you two different scenes that would please each of them respectively. So then you just learn, you just take away everything from both of them, what works for you from each of them, you know?
I hate to end this because we haven't even gotten started. Like I had so many questions about action films versus other genres and so many other things, but we are sadly out of
We
time.
can
We're
do
gonna
we can do like 15 of these, like Mission Impossible. You
Yeah.
don't have to say like if you know, we'd
We can
obviously
do a
love to have you
speed
back.
round.
Was
Yeah.
that?
We can do a speed round.
Well,
Yeah. No, we're definitely gonna have you back, Christopher. Hopefully we can schedule it soon. But before we go, I mean I had all these questions about technology and AI and trends and stuff that we just didn't get to. And you've already given 15 takeaways. so I don't know if you can even narrow it down to you know, what's the number one and two thing besides the pastries thing. But maybe that's it. narrow it down. What is your advice to someone watching this who wants to get into the industry?
It is just don't be afraid of the film industry. Don't be afraid of reaching out to people who may be incredibly successful. Um, but chances are, I mean, I've emailed hundreds of editors. I think one time from one editor did I ever get a nasty email back saying you shouldn't be writing. Once out of 100, almost everybody universally is really grateful to. And also, by the way, that one editor who I annoyed, that doesn't matter. Like it doesn't. I never want to annoy somebody, but it hasn't held me back. So you can't be afraid if it's something that you really want to do it. Then that's the number one thing is you just need to reach out to these people and just be short and sweet and polite. But you do have to get them to you have to start getting your name out there and try and meet them for a coffee, try and go into their cutting room and meet their assistants. And then the number two takeaway is to just develop yourself as an artist and have taste. And if someone says, I didn't like that film, well, like that happens a lot. It's like so I didn't like, what's your favorite film? Oh, it's this for me. Oh, I didn't like that film. Why not? It's just bad. That's not a good answer. If you can tell me why you didn't like it, why it doesn't work for you, what about it objectively that you feel like makes it not a very good film, then we can agree to disagree. Then it's fine. Whether it's my favorite film and your least favorite film, that's completely fine. But I think you need to have a reason, and that's really important because in a way we can all be editors. I mean, I used to do this thing with Eddie when we were on location. We'd go and watch movies together, and sometimes if it wasn't very good, I'd say, and now imagine you've been brought on as an additional editor. You've got 4 months left and you can't reshoot anything. What are you doing? So you can do that at home. Every time you watch a movie and you think that wasn't great, what would you do? What was it? Was it the structure? Was it the pace? Was there some character thing that wasn't clear? Was it tonally all over the place? I mean, but ask yourself these questions when you see something you don't like and try and imagine how you might solve them yourself. But that's really how especially if you want to be editing, if you want to, go through assisting and then become an editor after that, then you really have to develop, I think, your taste and your opinions on why things work. And that's what we're doing all the time now, is I've just put together a scene and I've had now an hour with you to not think about it. I'm gonna turn around and press play and I'm gonna think to myself, is that what I want to present to the director tonight? So I think that's really, really important to develop your own taste. And I think if you can objectively talk about things, then it's okay not to like things. But nobody likes the know-it-all who's, oh, that's not very good. Citizen Kane isn't that good. And then also have your opinions on what you do like. And it doesn't have to be the film school like, oh, it's Citizen Kane is the best film ever, followed by The Matrix. Like you can have your own your own tastes that aren't made. Just don't be afraid to be yourself and have your own individual identity if you can objectively describe what you like about it. And like Eddie's favorite guilty pleasure film is Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Objectively great.
Yeah.
It's not even up for debate, that, right?
Josh, your takeaway, and then
Well,
Jason, what do we have going on? Go ahead, Josh.
Look, I think it's, like all of to be able to articulate, it's hard because it's all subjective. But if you can articulate why you felt that there was something that didn't land, or that, something that happened in the first act didn't support, like yes, I think that's really important to not just say like it sucked, it was bad, because who cares then? Like, but if you can really articulate, what that thing was, or even articulate why something was incredible to you.
And be open-minded, especially if you're in the minority. If you hated a film that everyone else loves, try and okay, what's
I'm
not
a champion of that. Everyone tells, because Magnolia was like one of my least favorite films, and everyone beats me up about it. And we'll do a whole series about what I think didn't work about that film. But it's tough because you feel like everybody, like, why didn't I love The English Patient? Because everyone loved The English Patient, but you have to understand why from the inside.
You're the intermediary also. I mean, we're trying to be the audience a lot of the time, aren't we? That's one of the hardest things of being an editor, is to stay objective and be like an audience member. So you have to kind of be in tune a bit, in touch with the audience. And so you look at Final Reckoning's been getting mixed reviews. And so you think, okay, a lot of people struggle with the first hour. Like, what would we do differently? Are there too many flashbacks? I have to be careful what I say, but did we try and over-explain things? Did we try and make the previous films too much?
We're getting some spoiler alerts here.
No. But I get it. You can't, like, it has to satisfy, it has to conclude, it has to, right. It's like, that's a heavy lift. That movie's trying to achieve so many things in addition to being the conclusion. So it's
the
At any
obvious
rate,
thing, it should have been 4 hours, just like all these other movies that.
or a limited series, right? That
Right.
would have been the
Jason
disaster.
Banke, your takeaway, and tell us what's going on at Manhattan Edit Workshop, and then we'll wrap things up.
Sure, there's so many takeaways. I'd rather just know quickly what are you working on now? Just real quickly.
Right now, I'm doing a very tiny ITV show called Grace, which is a detective show with John Sim, which is I'm basically editing now. I actually left Final Reckoning a little bit early to edit this movie called Angels in the Asylum with Simon Pegg. So I was editing this little indie film for a while, and that's gone on hiatus now. And so now this director that I work, which kind of ties back into the networking thing, this director I worked with in 2019 as an associate editor on his movie, assisting another editor, has come back and he says, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to come and cut it for me? And I've been trying to make that jump now. So now I'm editing for him. And what's great about it is it's a 90-minute episode and it's a 5-week shoot and a 4-week edit. So this is it's Tuesday now. So I'm at the very beginning of my 4th week on the job and I have like an hour and 15 minutes assembled. And he wants everything with music and with backgrounds and so it's a small show, but it's a lot of work and it's just so good to be in sort of in that editing chair now. And yeah, so Grace Series 6, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Cool.
All right.
What we have coming up, lots of classes. Please go to the website. We got color correction, Avid, Premiere, After Effects, all that stuff. And we have a color panel coming out next month.
All right. So as usual, please subscribe, like, comment, do anything you can to get this video out. Christopher Frith, thank you so much for joining us today. We're having you back. I'm already scheduling you. You're going to get an email. Josh Apter, Jason Banke, thank you guys again so much. Please visit our website, MEWShop.com. We have so many classes going on, so much content online. Check it all out, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.